Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 12. Let's learn about how we work with polygons. So I've already gone ahead and detached a piece of the rifle model. So if you haven't downloaded it, you should look in the description, and that will allow you to follow along with me and modify the rifle model according to the new techniques and tools that you've learned. So our first tool is Insert Vertex. This tool is something I don't really recommend because it's very chaotic. You can see when I click here, it inserts a vertex and it automatically connects that vertex to different other vertices. So it will not just leave a vertex in the middle of your polygon. It will try its best to connect it to everything around it. And this is very chaotic, and so it's not a very clean tool. Our next tool is Extrude, where we select a group of polygons and click on the box to the right of Extrude, and then we have our settings, and we have two different settings here: the extrusion type and the height. So the height determines whether it's positive or negative, and then we have group, local, normal, and polygon. However, the reason I recommend you not to bother with the Extrude tool is because we already have the Bevel tool. Think of the Bevel tool as an upgraded Extrude tool. So with the Bevel tool, we can do the same thing that we do with the Extrude tool, except the Bevel tool has an additional option called Outline Amount, which will take that extrusion and make it smaller or larger. So this is one of those things that leaves you scratching your head, because the Bevel tool is pretty much just the extrusion tool, except with one more options. So I don't really understand why there's an Extrude tool and the Bevel tool where you can do the same thing with both. Or with the Bevel tool you have more options. So that's why you shouldn't really bother with the Extrude tool. So the Outline tool, if you click on that, you have one setting, Outline Amount, which will basically just increase or decrease the size of your polygon selection. So you can think of this as using the Scale tool. So you can use the Move, Rotate, and Scale tools on the polygons as well. So I can scale this polygon. Now, there's an important difference between using Scale and using Outline, and that's this. When I scale, it keeps the proportions of the selection. So watch what happens when I scale this. So it basically keeps the same proportions. However, when I use Outline, as you can see, it's not keeping the same proportions. It's just moving the edges closer together. So when I'm using Outline, what it's basically doing is it's taking these vertices right here and it's dragging them past this area, which is creating that strange, flickering problem that you see. So that's why I recommend not using the Outline tool. I recommend just using the Scaling tool, because it will give you less problems. So of course the Bevel tool is so important that I have it set to a shortcut, so I can quickly bevel. So with Bevel, you don't necessarily need to use the settings. You can simply click on Bevel, and then you can control it manually by clicking and holding, and then when you let go, you set the outline amount. However, there are some important settings that we should discuss. So if I select, I've created a plane right here. If I Control A to select all of them, click on Bevel. If I do Group or Local Normal, it will extrude all the selections, the entire selection as a whole. However, if I use the third option by Polygon, it will individually apply the same operation on each polygon individually. So this is a very great way of adding detail without having to, do it all individually. Our next tool, called Inset, basically will create another polygon within the selection. So this is how it looks like right now. If I Control A, inset by group, it's basically creating another set of polygons within the first selection. And of course, if I make the inset amount too high, it will start doing this. So you got to be careful with that. If you want for there to be an inset, I recommend you first perform the inset operation and then use the scale tool to scale it in. And that will avoid the flickering problem and intersecting the edges. And of course, I can use the polygon option to individually perform the inset operation on each polygon. So this is an example if I can quickly get the shapes that you want. A lot of nice detail and mechanical shapes. And you can see at this point, since all the polygons are already separate, it doesn't really matter whether I have local normal or polygon selected. It won't change how it works. And one more option for bevel is I'm going to go ahead and select these. These are polygons that are going around this surface. Click on bevel. Now if I select local normal, actually first of all I have to discuss what normals are. Imagine that there's a line, an arrow, pointing from the middle of every polygon. So regardless of what its shape is, if it's if it's a quad, or if it's a triangle, or if it's a long kind of quad, there is an arrow pointing from the middle of it directly outwards. So from this polygon, an arrow would be pointing up. From this one, an arrow would be pointing this way, and for this one, an arrow is pointing that way. These arrows are called normals, and there's one normal per polygon. So if I click on the bevel tool, you can see sometimes when you have strange topology, the tools can work improperly. You can see right now this tool is kind of performing a strange operation right here. I'm going to click on cancel. I'm going to select these edges and remove them. And now when I apply the bevel operation, it's not giving me that strange result anymore. So right now I've got it set to local normal. That means that the extrusion operation, or the bevel operation, excuse me, will be performed along the local normal of every single polygon. So you can see the faces are being beveled in the direction of every single polygon. However, if I use the group option, that will take the average of all the polygons and bevel, extrude in that direction. So watch the difference between group and local normal. So you can see what group is doing is it's taking the average normal of all of this selection, which would be somewhere going in this direction, and it's extruding in that direction. So that's useful to keep in mind. So we've got the bevel tool, the inset tool. Next we have the bridge tool. I'm going to go ahead and use this to demonstrate it. First of all, I'm going to isolate this, Alt-Q, apply a symmetry modifier, Z symmetry, flip. I'm going to go ahead and I can press 1 or click here to go into my sub-object mode, mirror, and then I can change it to mirror around the location that I want. So I'm going to move it up to here, for example. Put an edit poly modifier on top of that. So now I've got plane, which is what I started with, edit poly, symmetry, and now a new edit poly on top. I'm going to select these 4 polygons and these 4 polygons. Okay, so I've selected these 8 faces, 8 polygons, and I'll use the bridge tool. I'll click on the settings, and that will connect them. The settings for the bridge tool are very interesting. They can allow you to get some pretty cool results. So let's go ahead and try them out. First we have use specific polygons or use polygon selection. So this is a strange one because normally you just want to use the polygon selection. You would select the faces that you want and then you would apply the operation. However, if you choose use specific polygons, you can then pick polygon 1 and then click on pick polygon 2, and that will bridge between them. However, the reason that I don't recommend this one is because it's limited. You can only bridge one polygon to one other polygon. If you use polygon selection, you can bridge multiple polygons to other multiple polygons. So that's why I recommend using only the polygon selection. So we have segments, which will make this more complex and add more segments going across the bridge area. I'm going to create like 10. Our next tool, our next option is called taper, which will make the middle of the bridge thicker or thinner. The bias option determines which side, which selection will be more thicker. Near which selection will it be thicker. So if I increase that number, we can have a positive number or a negative number. So it will become biased to either one of the selections. And then we have a smooth option, which has to do with the smoothing groups. And then we also have a twist option, which will twist the bridge. And then we'll click on OK. So this is an example of how you can use various things to get the appropriate model that you're looking for. Or what I mean is, I started with a plane, and then I applied a symmetry operation. I bridged it, but now that I'm done with this, I can simply select, invert my selection, and delete this, and only be left with the column that I need. So modeling isn't so much about being a good artist or a good modeler as it is about being a good problem solver. And so I've used two planes to get me a column. And once I've used those planes to get the result that I want, I went ahead and deleted them, or what was left of them, and I'm only left with the column now. Okay, next we have flip. So in a previous video I told you about back faces, which are every face, every polygon has a front face and a back face. And a lot of tools will only work with the front face. So if I do a cut operation, it's cutting, but I cannot perform a cut operation on the back face. So a lot of tools will only work on the front face. So what the flip option will do is it will flip the face around. So if I select these faces and click on flip, they have now become back faces. However, this is something you should not really bother with. It can come in handy when you're working on game resolution meshes. And one more thing I should tell you is that when you're modeling, it's much easier to work without smoothing groups. As you perform various operations, 3ds Max has an annoying habit of automatically assigning smoothing groups. To remove all your smoothing groups, press Ctrl A. Actually, first make sure you have the Polygon Smoothing Groups section open. Press Ctrl A to select all your faces, and then click on Clear All. That will clear the smoothing groups from all of the faces. The smoothing groups are important when you're working on game models, game resolution meshes, and also for a certain modeling technique that I will show you later. For now, it's much easier just to model with it off. What smoothing groups basically do is they basically smooth the connection between the polygons. So you can see right now, if I turn off my edged faces, you can see right here, it's convenient to model without smoothing groups because you can see every face individually. However, if I press Ctrl A and then assign them all a smoothing group of 1, then deselect, you can see they now become smooth, which is good once you're done with your model, but as you're working, it's best to keep it off for easy recognition of your faces. And 3ds Max also has an annoying habit of automatically creating smoothing groups. So if I delete this, you can see right now this polygon has a smoothing group of none, 0, it doesn't have any. So if I delete that, if I use the bridge operation, then click on this polygon. Actually right now it has not created any smoothing groups, but sometimes when you perform various operations like a bridge and maybe the let me try the border. Okay, so it's not creating any smoothing groups right now, but usually as I'm modeling, it will have an annoying habit of creating smoothing groups and applying them. So every once in a while you might have to go into your smoothing group section, Control A, and clear all. So just keep that in mind if you start noticing any smoothing groups appearing. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this outer poly modifier. So next we have a very cool tool called Hinge from Edge. So I'm going to go ahead and select these. First I'm going to go ahead and clean them up a little bit. I'm going to select these polygons, and I'm going to click on the settings for Hinge from Edge. And we have several settings here. First we select the angle. Actually, first what we're going to do is we're going to select the hinge. We're going to click on Pick Hinge, and you can click on any edge to set the hinge. So let me try this top edge right here. Now I'm going to increase the segments to about 10. Actually, I'm going to keep it at 1 for now, and I'm going to increase the angle to 90 degrees. Now I'm going to go ahead and increase the segments. So you can see what it has done is it has taken those faces and it has rotated them around the edge. So it's very similar to like a bevel tool, except it will bevel it around an edge, which it calls a hinge. So it's taking those faces, it's extruding them, it's beveling them around this hinge right here. I can also click on Pick Hinge and change my hinge to this one, for example, and now it's extruding around this hinge, using that as a center. And I can keep on changing the hinge to get a variety of different results. A great way to quickly add certain details. And if I even increase the angle to 180, that would give me half of a cylinder. So I can use that to create even spherical, cylindrical details. And simply change the hinge. The hinge will act as the center of your extrusions. So definitely a very cool tool here. So go ahead and play around with that and see what kind of results you can get. A lot of what it means to be a good modeler is to use these tools in creative ways, and to really learn what all the options for the tools do. So I recommend you to play around with all the options and see how they change your modifications. See how they affect the tool. Next we have the Extrude Along Spline tool. So why don't you go ahead and go into your front viewport. Go under your Create panel, and we have Geometry, and to the right of that we have Shapes. So I have not covered these shapes yet, also known as splines, but just go ahead and click on the line and make sure your initial type is smooth and your drag type is smooth. And in your front viewport, start at the bottom or anywhere, and just create a shape with the splines. Just click, 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 and just create some sort of shape with the splines. And then right click to exit, and then right click to exit out of the line creation mode. I'm going to go back here. So I've just created a spline right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and select these, select one face, and I'm going to click on Extrude along spline, the settings for it. First I'm going to pick the spline. I'm going to select the spline that I've just created, which would be this line right here. And now what it's doing is it's extruding using the spline as a reference. And right now it looks ugly because it only has 6 segments. Let me go ahead and increase the segments to like 50. Now it looks a lot better. And align to face normal, you really want to keep that on. Otherwise it will align the spline to the normal of this face. Remember, the normal is an imaginary line, it going from the middle of the face outwards, exactly outwards. So when I click on align to face normal, the spline will now be coming out of the normal of this polygon. I have rotation settings, which will rotate it all around. I have the segment section, which will make it more detailed. The taper, which will make it thicker. And then the taper curve, which will also modify how thick it is. And then lastly I have a twist option, which will twist it. So this is a very good way of adding very detailed decorations to your architectural models. Very quick, very efficient, very fast. And the shape you get depends on how your initial selection looks like. So I'm getting this shape because I have a square selection right now. So let me go ahead and undo these settings. If I modify my shape to be a little bit more round, okay, a little bit like this, a circle. And if I go ahead and select these 4 polygons now, you can see I get now a cylindrical shape coming out of this geometry. So as you can imagine, this tool is very useful when you're creating wires, some sort of tentacles, when you're creating like an organic alien weapon type thing, a creature with all sorts of limbs coming out of it, organs, maybe different types of organic creature limbs and things like that. So it's a very useful tool. Definitely go ahead and give it a try. And I can have, for example, I'm going to go back to this spline. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of the spline. I'm going to go ahead and modify it around. So if I have multiple splines, just like sitting off to the side, I can then just try this one out. Click on this here, the name of the spline. Click on another spline, and that will give me another spline to try out. So what this basically does is it takes the spline and it orients it, aligns it to this face right here. So it takes the spline, basically what it basically does is it takes the spline right here and it orients it to that face right here. And then it extrudes from that face, from that selection, and follows the spline. So definitely try that out and see what kinds of results you can get. And lastly, we have our edit triangulation, retriangulate, and turn. So those are once again things for changing our triangulation around, how the model would triangulate. So I can click on a vertex, click on another vertex, and that will change my diagonal. So not really very important for us, but that's how it works. And of course you can also use the turn function to turn it, just like with the edit edges. So thank you and take care.